Yeah.
Looking ahead, what do you see as the most crucial steps needed to move towards a more cohesive future?
So I think, the way you overcome these divides is to build trust and confidence between each other, with our neighbors, with our public institutions, with our different levels of government. Um, and I really believe that comes through engagement. I think it's imperative for those that live in democratic societies to lean forward and involve themselves or engage themselves into the process on whether it's key issues they care about, whether it's supporting local initiatives to, feed the hungry or house the poor in some sort of way. Um, I just think it's really important for people to lean in. And I think through that engagement, we strengthen trust and confidence. But I also think it's critical for leaders at all levels to build transparency, accessibility to government, to be honest, to actively listen to their constituencies, regardless of whether they agree with those political beliefs or not. And when leaders fail to do that, there's got to be some level of accountability, whether that's at the ballot box or some kind of public outrage that says, hey, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable behavior. I also think, as you and I had discussed, there is an importance to civic education. I think these are things that we often take for granted in democratic societies, but there has to be a framework for teaching youth what it means to engage and how to be politically involved and what these political processes are and why they're important and why they have to be safeguarded. And I think in that education, part of it is academic, but I think part of it also is just getting out there and practicing the work of living in a democratic society. And I think those two things are absolutely critical to rebuilding trust and confidence.
Thank you. Yes, in Australia, they're just starting to do that more now, the education part. They're
Mhm.
just starting to do that. They realize that they've taken those things out of the curriculum and now they're putting them back in. Just in the last couple of months, they've talked about
Oh,
that.
that's good to hear. Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah. In your op-ed, you mentioned the importance of rebuilding trust.
Mhm.
How can that be achieved in a divided society?
Well, it's difficult, right? But I think again, it's two parts. I think leaders at all levels have a responsibility for leading in building trust. I've got a military background, among other things. I've been a reservist for most of my military career, but at times have been uh, full time with the military. And what I've seen in both the private sector or the public sector and the military is that the way you build bonds among teams of people who may not know each other is they go through some kind of hardship, right? You go through a training of some kind together. You go to a difficult environment where you're given some obstacle or challenge. You've got to overcome that. But in going through that, you build bonds of trust and confidence in one another, in your equipment, and your plans, and your leadership, and all of that. I do think that as particularly the United States in our experience now, we are going through a difficult time in terms of our political rhetoric. But I think if our leaders understand that, hey, we can leverage this difficulty to rely on one another, this can be real opportunity for us to strengthen our bonds of trust and confidence in one another. But and there's many external threats as well to democratic societies today too, not just state actors that are adversarial to the United States, but also we've the entire globe has just gone through a pandemic. You've got climate change. You've got the cyber threats and the new space as a new frontier where there's active and potential threats. All of these things are new to us. And the advent of AI and a lot of other technologies, we will experience in this century more human technological change than we saw in the previous 2000 years. So it's coming at us very quickly. And I think as a result of that, leaders have to see the pace that people are being forced to change. The environment's changing every day, and help us see that going through these hardships and relying on our neighbors and one another, and that we're all into this together, is absolutely critical messaging that leaders have to put out there. And I think that's one component, is the leadership side of this, to help us see that there's an opportunity here as we face these challenges to build trust and confidence in one another.
Right, thank you. So, how have your personal experiences with political division and engagement shaped your views and the recommendations you provide in the op-ed?
So I grew up in a very small town in the Midwest, and I've gone back and looked at the census, and I think the population in the last U.S. census was 6,500 or so. So very small town, and somewhat, I don't want to say isolated, not in terms of social isolation, but it was hard to get to places. It was you had to do quite a bit of travel to get to the closest big city or things like that. And so being in that type of environment, a lot of the people I grew up around looked very much like I did, came from similar experiences that I might have. But early on in my teens, I was participated in a program through my high school where we interacted with a church in inner city Detroit, where we went and tutored uh, kids in math, reading, life skills, those sorts of things, and built a relationship with that church and got to build relationships with the people there that we were working with. And that's where I first began to understand and see how different lives are in a place that was 55 miles down the road, and some of the challenges and obstacles that these kids faced versus people that grew up where I did. And I started to unpack this in my own mind and understood that there's a public policy component to all of this. And so early on in my life, I started to see that, how we, the built environment, how we have access to jobs, economic development opportunities, access to resources, all impact people's day-to-day lives. And I started to make these connections between our lives and public policy. Later, I had opportunity to travel to Romania in the mid 90s and late 90s when I was in high school and then college, and worked in some of the orphanages over there. And similarly, was experiencing these kids who had been abandoned into these state-run institutions that were a direct result of ruinous policies from Nicholas Ceausescu, who was the dictator, who had his vision was to create the world's largest workforce. So he outlawed contraception and would tax families who didn't have a certain number of children, yet these families couldn't afford to have these children. So the state-run orphanage system was born to house these kids. So I've had early experiences in my life where I connected dots between seeing need in the world, but understanding that public policy has a real role in that. I think today very much still come from those lessons of, public policy is a very powerful force for good. And I think anybody who wants to be a steward of public resources, who wants to lead, who wants to gain the public's trust and be a decision maker in those arenas, has to take that responsibility very, very seriously, and as a leader has an absolute duty and obligation, maybe no higher duty or obligation, but to message in a way that builds trust and confidence in those institutions, because without them, the alternatives are no better. At least in democracy, though imperfect, is the best form that mankind has yet to come up with.
All right, very good. Well, thank you for that. So finally, what message do you hope readers take away from the op-ed, from what you wrote?
Yeah, I think there's at the end of the day, political division is, I don't want to say unnecessary, but it feels like we're all neighbors. We all belong to communities. We all want what's best for one another, for our families, for our children, grandparents. We all want to pay our taxes and go to bed safe at night. You know, we all want to be good citizens. At least most people that I meet and deal with. I think the vast majority of people just want to contribute, be kind to one another, and live their lives and achieve their aspirations. And I think it all comes down to we all seek connection. We all want to be connected to one another. And I think the political volatility and division has come about. Again, there's external threats. There's a lot of change going on in the world right now, and that's created a lot of pressure. I think the pace can be overwhelming. I think a lot of people have been left behind and feel left behind. And so I think we have to exercise a degree of patience as an understanding that, hey, there's a lot of people who are trying to exist in this whirlwind pace of change and may not be grasping the new tools, might not have the best economic opportunities because they haven't been trained or they don't have the skill sets and all the new technology that comes out. It seems every year there's brand new things that completely transform our lives. But at the end of the day, we're all people just trying. And I think if leaders on both sides could recognize that and just reach out and listen and understand where people are coming from, I think a lot of these political divisions could kind of soften a little bit. I think on the other end, as an individual, particularly during a presidential election season in the United States, when I look at and survey the landscape of these things, I will not agree with any single candidate who is out there. So what I start to do is say, well, who do I align most closely with? That's important. You know, if I can align with a candidate who's running for major office 80% of the time, that's a huge win. 50% of the time, that's great. But I look for someone who has character, temperament, who's serious, who shows some logical reason or process for solving problems and thinking about things. And I think those are more critical than their left or right leaning on any particular issue. Is there's serious problems coming at us. How we define left and right in our country and really any place is changing all the time because the nature of what we exist in is changing all the time. So I think it's important that we look at the political landscape, the political discourse, and say, who's got the character, the temperament, the values, and will reach out and build trust and confidence in our public institutions. That's who I'm going to support.
All right, excellent, thank you. Well, I will work on this this afternoon. I got myself into a meeting to help someone local. You were just saying about new things are coming up, and I got a call from someone whose wife's just starting a new business, and she's having trouble with the tech stuff. Well, I'm the tech guy.
Oh yeah, you're the right guy to call.
Yeah, so I'm going up to their city, which we used to live in. It's about half an hour up the road from here. So I'm going up to help them to work out what to do. She's got things started. She's got the infrastructure, but she doesn't know how to put it together to make a website.
Right, that's right.
So I'm just going to show them how to do that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
and very neighborly of you, and I think that's what we all seek to do.
That's right. Yeah. So thank you for this. I will start working on this. I was thinking this morning. I need to talk to Ashley about what kind of things are useful for you and for them, because there's lots of different ways to do this. The hardest one, the most work, is an interview.
Yeah.
And because once you've done the easy parts, which is working out some questions and having the interview, then you have to transcribe it and work out what you're going to take out of it and then create a story. So it takes a little while.
Yeah. Do you use? I've never tried it. I've used AI for research quite a bit.
Yes.
it's also handy if you're doing, like, I'm a DIYer, so it's often handy for, hey, can I use this type of wood to do this thing? You know, will these screws support this kind of weight?
Right.
So it's been handy for those things. I've mostly trusted it. But I do know some people use it to transcribe video or audio clips. I don't know if you've ever tried that, if
I
there's a
I
good tool.
haven't done that, but I was looking at something the other day that says that it does it. So and I haven't had time this week to work with that, but I will have another look at that this afternoon before I start, because it says that it can do it. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, you can't always trust these things.
not at all.
No, no, and I mean, I proofread everything. I'm actually a slow reader, but I pick up 99.999% of all problems,
Oh, that's great. That's great.
which is a
Yeah.
good thing. Sometimes they just jump out at me. I just edited a book for a guy. I was only supposed to be formatting it for him, but things jump out at me because I'm an
Mhm.
editor and I'm doing it all the time. And after four things jumped out at me, I said to him, "I need to read this because there are some errors in here that my friend, another one of my friends who is he's a book editor, a screenwriter, and he's very good with editing. He missed these, and
Okay.
which is very unusual for him. But it's a nearly a 300-page book, I think.
Yeah, and
And
I think when you get into that, you get those blind spots because you've looked at it, you've looked at the material too long,
that's
right?
right. Yes.
Yeah.
But so I didn't find any more. That those It's just that those things jumped out at me, and they were the only ones that I found. Except he has uh, 30 illustrations in the
Hmm.
book, and half of them had spelling errors in the illustration. They were charts,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so the guy who wrote the book is not very careful. He's actually a filmmaker. He's a
Okay.
filmmaker, but but his spelling is not good, and he had spelling errors in them. So I edited all of his images to make them right.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you caught him. I mean, if he had published, he
Yes,
would have
yeah, he
been
would be
frustrated.
mortified if other people had
Yeah.
caught.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In my book, so I published one book, and I was it was all written and ready for publication. Then my dad got terminal cancer and um was in the final moments of his life. And the one thing I owed my publisher was the acknowledgments. And so I kind of had a draft, but I needed to finalize it and finalize that, sent it off. The book publishes, and then I realized there was one gentleman named John, or whose name was James, that I called John in the book, and I was just like, I felt terrible. But my books print on demand, so I was able, my publisher was able to just change the name, and it didn't if it didn't change the layout, it was no problem. They just
Yes,
could go in and fix it. But yeah, it's a terrible feeling. It's like, you do all this work and it comes down and gets out and you're like, oh, how did I miss this one little thing? But it happens. So
yes,
it's,
yes.
it's human, right?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book for a friend of mine who's actually a trade ambassador,
Oh, no kidding.
and I wrote a book about him. It's not on Amazon. He did it for his friends, and
Okay.
he passed away about 3 years ago.
Oh,
But I wrote this book and I finished it, and there was a spelling error in there, and he was so upset. And I said to him, that's why I sent it to you and asked you to get other people to read it and proofread it.
yeah, yeah,
And he didn't do that. He was a bullet at the gate, and he got it. He quickly flicked through it, and then he sent it off to be printed.
Wow. Wow.
And I said, and I told him not to do that just in case, because although I'm an editor and I pick up nearly everything, I'm not perfect.
Right.
And
We're all humans. Yeah.
so in a 200-page book, you can make a mistake, and I did, and so I fixed that. And he had things printed, so I said, okay, don't panic. I'll pay for a reprint, and which I did. And so I did. I didn't make much money out of that. It took me probably 5 months to put that book together, and so I made almost nothing out of it. But
You know, in
it was for him. We were good friends, and he was 92 when he
oh
passed
wow.
away.
Oh, that's sweet. But
Yeah, yeah.
I think about the army, I guess in the 90 when I was in ROTC 90s early 2000s, but when they would publish updates to a doctrine or a training manual, they would just republish the page and you'd go and it would tell you what page to go in and you'd essentially go and staple it over the old page or glue it on. I guess with one spelling mistake, maybe you guys could have just white out.
Yes.
Just reprint that one page and go in and tell everyone to
Right.
glue this on page 26, you know?
Yeah.